Most people don't struggle with money because they are lazy. They struggle because they believe things that feel right, things that sound responsible, things that society has repeated for so long that no one thinks to question them anymore. And the dangerous part is this: these beliefs don't look like problems. They look like common sense. But over time, they quietly shape your decisions. They limit your thinking. They control your actions. And before you realize it, you've built your entire life around something that was never true. On this channel, we don't just talk about money. We break down the invisible beliefs behind it. Because once you see the lie, you stop building your life around it. And if you're someone who wants to think deeper, who wants to see what most people ignore, then you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Because one of these beliefs is controlling your life right now. The first lie sounds simple, almost too simple. And that's exactly why it's so dangerous. The first lie is that if you work hard enough, you will eventually become successful. Now, this sounds right. It sounds fair. It sounds like the kind of advice you would give someone you care about. Work hard, stay focused, be disciplined, and everything will fall into place. But if that were completely true, then the hardest working people in the world would also be the most successful. And we know that's not how reality works. There are people who wake up early every day, who work long hours, who give everything they have, and yet they remain in the same position year after year. Not because they are lazy, not because they lack discipline, but because effort alone is not what creates progress. This is where most people get trapped. They confuse movement with advancement. They believe that being busy means they are getting closer. But in reality, they are just repeating the same cycle, working harder, without changing direction. And the system rewards leverage, not just effort. Because effort without awareness keeps you in motion, but never moves you forward. Think about it. If someone spends 10 years doing the same thing, in the same way, they don't gain 10 years of growth. They gain 1 year of experience, repeated 10 times. And this is where the lie becomes dangerous, because it gives you hope, but not clarity. It tells you to keep going, but never tells you where you're going. So you stay committed. You stay disciplined. You stay consistent. But you never stop to question whether the path you're on is actually leading somewhere different. And that's how people stay stuck, without realizing it. Not because they didn't work hard, but because they never stepped back to understand the system they were working in. And what makes this even more dangerous is that society celebrates effort. It praises hard work. It tells you to keep pushing, even when pushing harder is the exact thing keeping you in the same place. Because no one teaches you this early enough. That effort should be directed. That time should be intentional. That progress is not about how much you do, but about what you do repeatedly. Now here's the part most people never realize. If you build your life on this belief alone, you will always feel like you're close, but never actually arrive. And that quiet frustration, that feeling of doing everything right, but still not seeing results, that's not failure. That's misdirection. Because success is not just built on effort. It's built on awareness. And once you start seeing the difference, you stop asking, "Am I working hard enough?" And you start asking, "Am I working on the right thing?" And that shift alone changes everything. But this is only the first lie. The next one is even more dangerous because it looks like responsibility, and most people never question it. The second lie is one that feels responsible. It feels mature. It feels like something a wise person would say. Save your money. Be careful. Don't spend too much. And over time, you will become financially secure. Now, at first glance, this sounds like common sense. And in some ways, it is. Because saving money protects you. It gives you stability. It gives you breathing space. But here's where the story becomes deeper. Because what most people were never taught is that saving alone was never designed to make you wealthy. If you go back in time to a period where money held real, stable value, saving made sense as a long-term strategy. Because the system itself was different, currencies were tied to tangible assets, value moved slowly, and the world was not built on rapid expansion. But today, the system has changed, and most people are still operating with an old set of instructions in a completely new environment. Think about someone who spends years carefully saving money, avoiding risk, delaying opportunities, choosing safety over growth because they believe that one day all that discipline will translate into freedom. But slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, the value of that money changes. The cost of living increases, opportunities pass by, and what they thought was progress becomes preservation. And this is where the lie becomes subtle. Because saving feels like movement, but often it's just standing. I'm still, safely. There's a story that reflects this perfectly. Years ago, there was a man who worked for decades, carefully saving every extra coin he earned. He avoided unnecessary risks. He lived below his means. He did everything right, and by the time he retired, he had accumulated a decent amount of money. But something unexpected happened. The world around him had changed faster than his strategy ever anticipated. The value of what he saved did not match the life he had postponed. And for the first time, he realized something most people realize too late. That playing defense your entire life does not create opportunity. It only protects what already exists. And this is not a message against saving. It's a deeper message about balance. Because wealth is not built on protection alone. It is built on expansion, on calculated movement, on understanding that growth requires stepping beyond comfort. So when someone tells you, just save more, and everything will work out, what they are really giving you is half the equation. And half the equation is never enough to change your life. Now here's where it becomes even more interesting. Because the third lie is one that sounds even more logical. And for that reason, it traps even more people. The third lie is that you need money to make money. Now this belief stops more people than failure ever could. Because it creates hesitation. It creates delay. It creates the idea that you are not ready. You'll hear people say, I'll start when I have enough. I'll invest when I'm stable. I'll build something when I have capital. And on the surface, that sounds reasonable. But if you look deeper, you'll start to notice a pattern. Some of the most valuable things in today's world were not built on money first. They were built on value, on ideas, on skill, on understanding how to solve problems. There was a time when creating something required significant resources, factories, land, infrastructure. But today, the landscape has shifted, and yet the mindset has not. There are people right now who are building influence, building platforms, building income streams, starting with nothing but knowledge and consistency. And at the same time, there are people waiting for the perfect moment, waiting for enough money, waiting for certainty. And that waiting becomes a habit because the belief itself gives you permission to delay your own progress. There's a quiet truth here that most people don't confront early enough. You don't need money to start. You need clarity. You need direction. You need the willingness to move before you feel ready, because money is often the result not the requirement. And the longer you believe that you need it first, the longer you postpone the very process that could create it. And this is how the system holds opal in place, not by force, but by belief. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself something honestly. Which of these beliefs have you been operating under without ever questioning it? Not what sounds good, not what feels comfortable, but what is actually shaping your decisions right now. Because awareness is where change begins. And what comes next is the belief that looks the safest of all, but quietly limits more people than anything else. The fourth lie is one that feels safe. It feels responsible. It feels like the kind of decision people respect. And that lie is that stability is the safest path. From a young age, most people are taught to seek security, find something stable, hold onto it, avoid risk, play it safe. And on the surface, there's nothing wrong with that, because stability protects you. It gives you structure. It gives you predictability. But here's what no one explains. Stability can quietly become a cage, because when you become too comfortable, you stop exploring, you stop questioning, you stop growing. And over time, what once felt like safety becomes limitation. There's a pattern you'll start to notice. If you observe people over a long period of time, the ones who grow are not always the ones who played it safest. They are the ones who were willing to step into uncertainty, even when it felt uncomfortable, even when it wasn't guaranteed. History is full of this pattern. People who left what was predictable to build something unknown, not because they were reckless, but because they understood something deeper. That growth rarely lives inside comfort. But the system rarely encourages this, because predictable people are easier to manage, easier to guide, easier to keep within structure. So the idea of stability becomes something people chase without ever asking what it is costing them. And the cost is often invisible at first. It shows up slowly in the form of missed opportunities, untested potential, unlived versions of your life. Because when you choose stability above all else, you are not just choosing safety. You are choosing limitation. And most people don't realize this until years have passed. The fifth lie is even more subtle, because it hides inside comparison. And that lie is that rich people are simply different. You'll hear it in quiet conversations. They were lucky. They had connections. They had something I don't have. And while sometimes there are advantages, this belief goes deeper than that. Because the moment you believe that successful people are fundamentally different, you create distance between you and what is possible for you. You stop seeing their path as something you can learn from and start seeing it as something you can never reach. There's a story often told in philosophy about perception. Two people can look at the same mountain. One sees something impossible to climb. The other sees a path waiting to be discovered. The difference is not the mountain. It is the belief about what is possible. And this is what separates most people. Not intelligence, not background, but perspective. Because the moment you shift from "they are different" to "what do they see that I don't?", everything changes. You begin to observe differently. You begin to think differently. You begin to act differently. And slowly, that gap you once believed was permanent starts to close. But if you hold on to that belief that they are different, that they have something you don't, you protect yourself from effort. But you also limit your own growth. And that's how the system keeps people small. Not by removing opportunity, but by shaping perception. Now, the final lie is the quietest one of all. It doesn't sound dangerous. It doesn't feel urgent. And that's exactly why it's so powerful. The sixth lie is this: someday I'll start. This is the belief that steals more potential than failure ever could, because someday feels harmless. It feels patient. It feels responsible. But in reality, it is delay disguised as planning. People say, I'll start when I'm ready. I'll start when things are clearer. I'll start when I have more time. But readiness is often an illusion, because clarity does not come before action. It comes from action, and time is never found. It is made. There are people who have been saying someday for years, and without realizing it, that word has become their pattern. Because every time you delay, you reinforce hesitation, and over time, hesitation becomes identity. There's a quiet realization that hits people later in life, that the biggest risk was never failing. It was waiting too long to begin, because time moves whether you act or not. And one day, you look back and realize you were always closer than you thought, but you kept waiting. Now step back for a moment and look at everything we've just uncovered. 6 beliefs that sound harmless, that feel normal, that most people never question. Work hard and everything will work out. Save and you'll be secure. You need money to start. Stability is safety. They are different from you. Someday you'll begin. Individually, they seem reasonable, but together they form a system, a system of thinking that keeps people in the same place, year after year, without realizing why. And the moment you begin to see it, really see it, you can no longer move the same way, because awareness changes direction, and direction changes outcomes. If something in this video made you pause, made you reflect, made you question something you've always believed, then something has already shifted. And that shift is where everything begins. Because most people will hear this and move on, but a few will take it seriously. And those few are the ones who move differently, think differently, and eventually live differently. This channel is not for everyone. It's for people who are ready to see beyond the surface, to question what feels normal, and to take responsibility for how they think. Because the truth is, you won't always come across something like this, and this might be the last time you see this channel if you don't decide to stay connected to it. So if you've made it this far, you already know this is different. Stay with it, because what you understand next will determine how you move forward.